Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today for our Employee Security Awareness Training webinar titled Keeping Your Data Safe. This webinar is brought to you by Smarttech and Security Innovation. Your presenters today will be William McSweeney and Ed Adams. Our first presenter, William McSweeney, is currently the Head of Business Development and Sales at Smarttech. He has over 10 years' experience dealing with IT security issues across a range of industry sectors and company sizes, ranging from large multinational organizations to small and medium-sized businesses. He has a distinguished background in sales management and an acute knowledge of the technical requirements for implementation of enterprise-level software and hardware. Our second presenter, Ed Adams, is currently the CEO of Security Innovations. He is also the Vice President of ISECO, the International Secure Software Engineering Council, and is on the Board of Directors for the National Information Security Group. Ed has a wealth of experience gathered through a long and distinguished career to date, covering many business disciplines such as sales, marketing, business development, product management, and he holds an MBA in information technology. Ed currently uses his expertise to direct application security experts in order to help organizations understand the risks in their software and develop programs to mitigate those risks. With regards to some of the technical information about this webinar, all audio is delivered directly through the speakers on your device, so you may need to increase the volume. We will allow time for questions to be answered at the end of the full presentations. However, you can submit those questions throughout the presentation. This is done by typing your questions in the Questions tab located on the right-hand side. Please make it clear who the question is addressed to. Due to time constraints, we may not be able to answer all queries, but we will do our best. Additionally, this webinar is recorded and will be sent to all participants with contact details for the presenters. So now I will hand you over to the trusted hands of William McSweeney.
Thanks, Oisin, for that great introduction. Hello, everybody, and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule today to come in this webinar. We hope that you find this information provided beneficial and worthwhile. As Oisin said, my name is William McSweeney, Business Development Manager with Smarttech. Smarttech is an international security operations centre providing 24/7, 365 support across the globe. We have a state-of-the-art security operations centre based in Ireland, which is powered by best-of-breed security technologies. We work with some of the leading security vendors in the world, including IBM, Trend Micro, AlienVault, RSA, Nessus, Rapid7, where we provide a whole range of products and services to our customers using these solutions, including your security remediation, forensics, vulnerability, penetration, SIEM, log correlation, APT services, etc. And of course, with Security Innovation for cyber awareness training, where we are a leading global partner. Some of our clients would be some of the largest clients in the world, with thousands and thousands of employees, right down to small companies who might have 50 or so employees. The larger companies we manage typically have massive budgets for security around perimeter defences, such as your antivirus, sophisticated firewalls, IPS, identity management, SIEM, etc., all of which use big, chunky, next-generation technologies. However, sometimes you will be surprised to see that some of the bigger companies just have standard antivirus and a standard firewall, and spam filtering technologies like smaller organizations. As we are at the cold hard face of organization security posture, the one constant that we see across the board from companies that we deal with on a daily basis is that, unfortunately, they are being successfully breached no matter what. Companies have and are being breached actively no matter what measures they actually take. We are in the midst of an arms race. It's the good guys against the bad guys, and it's clear from everyday breaches that the bad guys are winning. And the reason that these hackers have been so successful with large international organizations and similarly small SMB clients is that these guys are being very clever in the way that they are targeting people. They are targeting the weakest link. That's the part between the chair and the desk, the human being, the employee, the most vulnerable part of your network. It is the user that is the weakest link in your network above all of your expensive security perimeter defenses that I have already mentioned. The result we see in pretty much every breach that we analyze is that the human being has been successfully breached and been compromised. They are compromised by social engineering and phishing, etc. And in all cases, data of some sort and of high importance has been exfiltrated from their system, which in turn has led to a much bigger breach. To give you a real life scenario, a few weeks ago, one of our clients, a financial institution that we support on an ad hoc break-fix service basis, were breached. This organization has approximately 1,200 users, one of which was spearphished via a malicious email. Basically what happened, the user got sent an email from finance@xyzcompany.com. This user clicked on the link. Once this was done, a silent download malware was triggered onto their computer. What happened next? The malware successfully circumvented all of their antivirus, all of their firewalls, hijacked their mail server, and emailed thousands of their customers' employees. Later we found this malware to be called Diarrhea, a new malware that had escaped signature-based antivirus vendors' updates when it was released. As you can only imagine, the damage that this caused was very significant, with the downtime to their networks, and the whole remediation process was very costly and had a huge impact on business continuity. Ladies and gentlemen, this is typical of what we see on a daily basis, and as I mentioned already, of the forensic investigations we do, 90% of the reasons behind the breach was due to a user error, especially around phishing. On the back of these many incidents which show that phishing is a common method of network compromise, what we decided to do is to re-architect how the hack is actually happening. And we are working with companies to show how they are being breached, which is proving very, very popular. How do we do this? Basically what we do is we get an email sent from, for example, admin@xyz.com in an email template relative in design to the company's existing email brand framework. This email has an inbuilt link which leads to a fake landing page with a domain, for example, admin@xy.z.com, which is very similar to the actual company domain and the company website detail, but is actually not the domain or not the legitimate company page. The user is then asked to enter specific details to the form, for example, their personal or work-related details, social security numbers, PPS numbers, date of births, etc. The user submits this form and the information is confirmed, which then in turn leads the user to an awareness information landing page to let them know that they have been part of a phishing assessment, which was completed to raise awareness. We have conducted this exercise for some leading CIOs, CISOs, risk and compliance officers of huge global organizations, and unsurprisingly to us, almost all have said that they alone would have been tricked into this assessment in a real life scenario. And this is exactly why we work very closely with our training partner, Security Innovation, where we help to deliver a range of security training modules, which we will explain later in this webinar. So let's take a look at the current IT threat landscape and see who the actual guys behind the masks are that are compromising networks. There are 5 different categories of hackers, namely, there's organized crime. These consist largely of the Russian and Eastern Mafia, who are involved in the well-known, renowned Target breach, where millions of customer data records were stolen. You've got state-sponsored hackers. These guys built databases for giant espionage games who are well funded and use cutting-edge hacking techniques. The examples here would include the New York Times hack by the Syrian Electronic Army and NATO and Ukrainian government hacks by the Russian APT-28 group. You've also got lone wolves. These individuals typically act on their own and sometimes are loosely connected with smaller hacker groups. You've got script kiddies. These are typically juvenile attackers who use scripts, programs to develop more sophisticated hacks or deface websites. Then you've got hacktivists. These guys break into computer systems for personal revenge, political or social purposes, or general mayhem, and Anonymous is the most famous global hacktivist group on the planet. Now we take a look at hacker motivations. Obviously for financial gain via credit card or bank details, and also identity theft for personal details including social security numbers, date of births, next of kin, etc., names, addresses, all that kind of stuff. Or for philosophical differences or protest, you've got cyber warfare, vendetta, or you've got other guys that will do it for fun or curiosity. Here's a breakdown of cybercrime stats by industry taken from a recent IBM report. Over 1/4 of all attacks are targeting manufacturing industry verticals. That's 26.5%. For obvious reasons, 1/5 of all attacks are targeting banking and financial sector. 20% are made up of others, made up of government, education, etc. 18.7% communications. Healthcare, which we've seen a major rise in recently, is at 7.3%, but is growing every single day of the week because of exfiltration of personal details from their systems, and 6.6% retail. Next we move on to a graphic taken from the Norton report 2013, illustrating the global price tag of consumer cybercrime. The cost of cybercrime in 2013 was an astonishing $113 billion. This was taken via fraud, theft, repairs, etc. This equates enough money to hosting the 2012 London Olympics nearly 10 times over, which is quite staggering. Another graphic from the Norton report 2013 illustrating that there are 378 million victims of cybercrime per year. That's over 1 million victims per day, or it equates to 12 victims per second. Next we look at the most popular attack methods taken from the European Network and Information Security Agency recently. We can see that the top threats that are on the increase include drive-by exploits, worms and trojans, code injection, exploit kits, botnets, compromising confidential information, etc. So let's take a closer look at some of these methods, some of which will resonate with you, I'm sure. You've got a drive-by download. This refers to the injection of malicious code in HTML code of websites that exploits vulnerabilities in user web browsers. These attacks target software residing in internet user computers, web browsers, browser plugins, and operating systems, and infects them automatically when visiting a drive-by download website without any user interaction. Commonly known as malvertising also. Next you've got password compromise, which is dramatically on the rise. This is the attainment of login credentials by unauthorized parties. Basically what hackers do is they look to steal credentials, username, passwords, file activation codes by brute force or dictionary attacks, or by exploiting weak passwords or weak cryptography. Social engineering is a buzzword which is a hacking technique on the rise now with the evolution of social media, especially around Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Google Chrome, to name but a few. This is the manipulation of a person to gain information or access details via phishing, spear phishing, mining social networks, and using intimidation, persuasion, and assistance to snare the victim. Another method which we see commonly in our SOC is referred to as a Trojan horse attack, which is an apparently safe program that contains hidden malicious code in cracked programs or file sharing programs like torrents, VOOs, FrostWire, etc. Next, we move on to targeted attacks. Targeted attacks are custom designed malwares built to target a specific entity or organization over a long time span with the end goal of data exfiltration. This is done by gaining access to controlled target system via information gathering, via advanced hacker techniques to fulfill attack goals through email, infected media, social engineering, etc. Targeted attacks can be designed to go after C-level executives as they are high in the food chain for a large organization with access to valuable data and information about that company. So what are the impacts of a breach? There's fines and penalties from the government and audit companies. Lost sales, obviously if you cannot function, you cannot sell. There's higher costs moving forward in terms of introducing new technologies, new measures, training, PCI compliance, etc. And also you've got huge brand damage and a high share loss. Here we can see some interesting stats which I took from the Ponemon Institute around cybercrime. Almost half of all attacks were passwords. Pins with credit cards and payment history were also high up there. To a lesser extent, but still there, social security numbers, driver's licenses for identity theft, etc. In the survey, they also looked at what was the most negative consequences of a data breach, which I touched on earlier. Half of all consequences was down to loss of productivity, then customer loyalty, legal action, media coverage, etc. Now, we look at what was the main cause of the breach. In almost 1/3 of all cases, a negligent user was the problem, followed by outsourcing to a third party, malicious insider, systems glitches, etc. We firmly believe that if an organization successfully implements security awareness training, you will see a reduction in breaches in line with industry metrics. Just a few interesting quotes from leading global audit organizations before I end and pass you over to our team in Security Innovation to talk about the solution. Deloitte and Touche said that employee misconduct and unintentional actions like errors and omissions are the greatest cause of data security breaches. Dell Computers said that according to a recent study of over 700 IT security practitioners, 71% believe that their employees frequently put their organization's confidential data at risk. Forrester Research, they said technology alone cannot address one of the most difficult problems to manage in security, the human factor. Ernst & Young said lack of IT security awareness training is the main obstacle to an efficient security program. And CompTIA said nearly 90% of organizations that have implemented awareness training believe that the number of security breaches they've encountered has been reduced. I have to say in summary that I cannot stress the importance of security awareness training for an organization highly enough. Us as a security provider for remediation, detection, hardware and software are booming. And we're booming because organizations are simply not investing in this area successfully, which is training their staff. Our lives will become a lot easier with respect to managing our customers if they invested in security awareness training. Now I will hand you over to security training partner Ed Adams, CEO of Security Innovation, who will talk to you about the solution. Thanks for your precious time.
Thank you, William. I should be sharing my screen, and hopefully you can all see it. Okay. Again, William, thank you very much for that excellent introduction. And I'm going to be talking with you about some best practices on developing and rolling out a successful security awareness training program. And then right at the end, the very last slide, I'll talk about some specific solutions that you can procure directly from the team at Smarttech. Now, I want to start with a very simple but important message. And that basic message is that the human factor is the leading cause of most data breaches that we've seen over the past few years. And the objective of creating and rolling out an effective security awareness training program is to change the behavior of your staff. Training in and of itself really doesn't do much. In fact, Einstein, in this quote on the screen here, famously said, "Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think." And that is really what a good security awareness training program does, is it will get your staff to start to think before they act and think about potential consequences that they're doing. Now, earlier, William mentioned a couple of high-profile breaches that have occurred over the past year or so. One of them, Sony Pictures, we're all aware of. That was reportedly from a hacktivist group with personal motivations. Unfortunately, one of the things that made that attack much worse for Sony Pictures is on one of the servers that was attacked, there was a folder that was titled passwords, and in that folder was credentials for usernames and passwords for a bunch of other systems at Sony Pictures. And that is the type of action that you just can't take as an organization, and particularly an organization that has a high profile like a Sony Pictures and a very valuable brand to protect. Another one that was mentioned earlier is Target. And many folks don't realize that the Target breach was initially perpetrated through the HVAC system, the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system. And normally when some folks hear that, they think, wait a minute, you mean Target was hacked through the air conditioning unit? And yes, they were. The air conditioning system had a default username and password of admin and password, and that is the most common thing that a hacker will try, and is very easy to get into systems that don't change the default username and password. Now, there were some other problems in the Target breach. For example, they didn't properly segment the network, so the part of the network that stored credit card information was separate from that managed the HVAC system. But regardless, if they had just changed that username and password on the HVAC system, they might have been able to prevent that breach. And it's such a simple act that they could have done. So, as folks in IT, it's very easy for us to think about keeping all of our systems up to date, patching, making sure that firewalls are in place, and etc. Well, you can think about your staff in the same way. People need configuration and patching. They need updates. They need to be reminded on a regular basis, and that's really what a security awareness training program is all about. And they do work. This is a couple of data points from PricewaterhouseCoopers survey done last year, but you can find many similar types of data. The Ponemon Institute very famously issues the cost of a data security breach each year. And what they've been doing recently is they've been identifying the cost of a data breach for organizations that do and do not have security awareness and incident response programs in place. And it is much smaller cost for organizations that have incident response and security awareness training in place when a data breach does occur. So what type of training is needed? In general, we see two types of awareness that is needed in almost every organization. First is general security awareness, which is intended for almost the entire staff. This includes things like education on phishing and how to avoid clicking on links that you shouldn't click on in emails. Safe browsing, how to use social networks and media in safe ways, etc. Strong passwords. This general security awareness is useful for anyone, regardless of their an administrator, a secretary, someone in IT. If they've got access to your technology systems, you should consider putting them through some type of security awareness training. The second type of training is more technical training, and in particular for those organizations that develop any kind of software, whether it's internal or through the use of an external third party. It's very important to make sure that that software is being written securely and then deployed and configured securely. Software really does run our lives these days, everything from our smartphones and tablets to our automobiles. A modern-day luxury automobile has about 100 million lines of code in it. And that's a lot of software code. So it impacts everyone. And I'll talk a little bit in the next couple of slides about how to roll out an effective security awareness training program for software development teams. And I'll follow that up with some more specifics about general staff awareness and then best practices for security awareness training program in general. So here's another view. This is just taking that last slide and going a bit deeper. Starting with the general audience at the bottom, there are more of them, hence the larger part of the triangle. And as you work your way up the stack, and as you go from bottom to top, the training becomes more technical. You have fewer and fewer staff that you need to train. So, application development teams, for example, you do need to train them on secure design and secure coding, security testing, but there's much fewer of them. But this just kind of breaks out as an example the types of training that you'd see for the different kinds of roles. So now if we were to take just the top few pieces of this triangle, the software development teams, and break that out even further, what I'm going to show you on the next slide is that role-based training is paramount, especially for application development. Many organizations think, I have to, quote, train my developers. But when they think train my developers, they don't necessarily think of the different roles that are in software development teams. Software architects need different types of training than software developers, and they need different types of training than software testers and program managers and project managers. And the bottom few bullets here describe some of the training that is contextual to each one of these roles in software development. A developer needs to know how to code defensively, absolutely. But however, architects, they need to understand what various threats might be present for their software applications, and they need to choose design elements and architecture elements and define security requirements in such a way that the developers will code and adhere to those requirements. And many reasons that software is insecure is because the developers aren't given security requirements. And it's very much a forcing function. So if an architect or a business analyst or program manager doesn't understand potential threats that are faced by a certain software application, they won't be able to define the security requirements that the developers then need to implement, and they also won't be able to define the threats that the software testers and QA team should be verifying and checking against before that software is released. So there is an effect throughout the entire chain. And this also holds true for general staff, but I'll get to that in a moment. This diagram here just shows a very simple role-based training curricula for a few different roles in a typical organization. So for an architect, you might start with fundamentals of application security, then introduce them to architectural risk analysis and introduction to cryptography. For developers, you want them trained on how to write secure code and then how to conduct a security code review. That's very different than the training that you'd roll out to a quality assurance or software test professional, which is much more around how to test for specific vulnerabilities, such as the OAuth top 10 in respect to web applications. Now, as we move to general staff, you have the same type of model where you have special training based on the role. And you'll notice that many of the training modules listed here are common throughout all the roles. That's fine for a baseline, and then you can customize that with something that is specific. So for example, the executives, you definitely get to train them on mobile device security because so many executives, they just want to take their smartphones and their tablets that they use in their personal life and connect them to the IT systems, and there's a whole bunch of potential problems that can go along with that if you don't have some kind of mobile device management system, or at least BYOD policy in place. And then even if you do, sometimes executives think that they're exempt from adhering to policies, so you need to train them on the risks. And a great way to train executives on risks is to make it personal. Make sure that they understand not necessarily the risks to the business, which you should train on, but also how their personal information might get stolen, their identity, their bank accounts might get compromised. And that is a growing trend where hackers are targeting executives or executive assistants in organizations to try to get to their personal accounts in addition to the corporate accounts or the corporate records. Now, rolling out a security awareness training program starts with procuring or building some type of training asset, but that's just the first step. Complementing some type of training, whether it's instructor-led or computer-based, with additional assets, asynchronous assets, as they're referred to in the training industry, is a very effective way of reminding folks in a non-threatening way to maintain an aware security posture. It's the same reason why there are speed limit signs on roads every 400 yards or 500 meters. It's because people tend to forget if they're not reminded. And there's several different mediums that you could use to deliver effective asynchronous training assets. You can have articles, maybe they're delivered via email, or maybe they're still an office memo. There are tip sheets and infographics. You can make things like posters with seasonal messages on them to keep things contextual and make sure that that folks are paying attention. One of the most effective training programs that I've seen is one that was developed at SAP, and the chief security officer at SAP did a lot of things very well, but one of the things that he did is after staff went through an awareness training program, he made sure that he was sending out a regular message from him. He kept it very short and would either refer to an industry event or something that was relevant to SAP, just to keep his message about security awareness on the radar of all staff. But he also did very clever things. For example, in all of the bathrooms, he put a sticker on the mirror that said, "You're looking at the most important security officer at SAP." And this asynchronous touch point was a way for him and his staff to constantly remind everyone at SAP, because who doesn't use the bathroom at least once during an 8-hour workday, that they are important and they need to keep security in mind. Now, asynchronous assets do need to be refreshed on a regular basis, and rolling them in and complementing them with computer-based trainings or videos, infographics and tip sheets, and alternating which weeks get which certain type of asset delivery is an effective medium. Because if you are always delivering the same message, you will get tuned out. There is alarm fatigue, basically, that tends to happen. How many times are you walking through a parking lot and you hear a car alarm go off and you don't even look in that direction anymore because we're just so accustomed to, oh, that happens all the time, it's no big deal, I'm just going to ignore it. Well, you don't want your staff thinking that when it comes to security awareness training. So you need to mix up the delivery and keep the types of materials in a format that varies. Make them visually appealing, make them contextual to to March. At the end of March, maybe it's Easter, and that is celebrated in the country that you need to roll out this training program. So you're having an Easter-based theme on your infographics. Those are the types of things that make an effective communication program. Regular check-ins to make sure that the staff is staying aware. And of course, making sure to document what you're doing, particularly if you have any kind of compliance requirements, because what the auditors are going to want to see is, oh, are you rolling out a training program? Yes, okay. Demonstrate to me what type of training are you rolling out, and show me who has taken it, who hasn't taken it, are you collecting any metrics, etc. Now, there are a couple of different ways, and there's many different ways to roll out a training program. One option is, everyone gets everything, and we've seen this be effective. One way to fail in this respect is to deliver all content all at one time and then think you're done. So if you want everyone in the organization to receive some kind of core training and also have follow-on training, whether it's computer-based or newsletter, make sure to refer to this past slide to make sure that you are constructing a program that has a regular drumbeat of security awareness, as opposed to one massive push and then moving on. Another effective method that we've seen is creating security champions or fire marshals in key groups. And this helps because if you can gain the acceptance of, say, a development lead or someone that on the IT team or someone in the finance team, and leverage them to either deliver the training or just make sure that their groups are going through it, it's much less threatening because they are a kindred spirit, and it's much met with less resistance when, for example, a developer is talking to another developer about security, as opposed to the security police coming down the stairs and beating on the heads of the developers. So make sure you take your secure coding training. So if you can identify and develop and foster those security champions, it's a very effective way of increasing the success likelihood of your training program. So let's talk about a few steps for shaping the training program. First and foremost, you need to make your training program contextual to the groups that are going to be receiving it. So I mentioned earlier how a software architect needs different types of training than a software developer. Well, imagine in a retail environment, Betty the cashier certainly needs different training than the Java developer who's at the home office working on the e-commerce site. And it's important to identify, buy, or build training that can be role-based. This is where those asynchronous training assets can become very valuable. You may have an environment where not all employees that need security training are connected to the internet or have some kind of computing device. So you need some type of asynchronous training asset that can be delivered offline. This is where the posters and the tip sheets become very valuable, as does things like instructor-led training or virtual classroom. So determine that appropriate mix of media for your organization. Keep in mind that it is contextual. This is not a one-size-fits-all solution by any means. And if at all possible, identify group owners who are responsible for rolling out that message. It doesn't have to be rolling out the training program itself, but just rolling out the message, the reminder to take their training. That helps a lot. And if you can at all integrate your compliance requirements or your internal governance controls, so you can map and show where your training is meeting those requirements, you will have 2 thumbs up and probably a gold star on your forehead from the auditors, whether they're internal or external, because not only are you making their lives easier, but they then don't have to file an audit finding for failure or inconclusive on a certain requirement. Now, evaluation is also important. One more thing on here. I talked about making the training contextual, but also making it personal and making it fun also can make a huge difference. For example, I tend to fly on Delta Airlines a lot, and most of us have taken numerous flights, and everyone is aware of that safety video at the beginning of the flight, and they're typically dreadfully boring with flight attendants and pilots, talking heads, and no one really pays attention. Well, what Delta did recently is they created a series of short but very funny theme-based safety videos, and they did one from the 80s, and they had people that were dressed like the 80s, and they used terms from the 80s, and what that does is it makes people pay attention. And they also mix it up, so they don't just have the same video every single time. They've built about 6 or 7 maybe different types of safety videos, and they rotate them on a regular basis, but they're all funny. And you can actually find these on YouTube. Just look for Delta safety videos, and you'll watch them. They are actually pretty darn funny. But the effect is that people are now paying attention to the safety video, and that was the objective. So they made it fun, they made it interesting, and as a result, they achieved their objectives because people are now watching and paying attention. Even someone like myself, I fly 50 to 100,000 miles each year, and I'm watching the darn videos. I mean, I could probably recite them in my sleep, but I'm still watching them because they are funny. Now, any good training program will only be effective if you can measure and show the results of them. And there are numerous ways to do this as well. There are examinations. This is kind of the classic school mentality of you've gone through a training class, now I'm going to ask you questions about the content and see if you can answer them, which is fine. It's a perfectly acceptable way to assess the effectiveness of a particular training course. There are also different metrics that organizations use. There's a policy comprehension metric, which is very effective, again, for the audit community, but from an information security perspective and an internal governance perspective, you do want to make sure that the policies that you're writing are understood, because very often they're not, and you don't have a good way of knowing whether or not they are. So consider how you'd get feedback about the comprehension or the understanding of the policy that you've created. And this is where doing a short skills analysis or a gap analysis, and would certainly recommend engaging someone like Smarttech for that, can really help. And it's just as simple as leveraging maybe an online survey or a paper survey just to get started. It's basically a pre-assessment so you can gain an appreciation for the skill level and the knowledge level of the target teams that you're looking to train. It will also help you customize your training program. Maybe some need a bit more intense training on certain topics. Maybe some groups are very well informed, and that may be because they have a manager that's more security aware. So starting with a skills analysis definitely is a best practice. And other metrics, again, to help you make informed decisions. What are you doing? Learning management systems, or LMSs, are extremely helpful because they're not just a way of delivering computer-based training, but they also will track all sorts of interesting metrics. Which user opened which course? Have they completed it? What's the percentage completion? Did they take the exam? What was the score of the exam? Have they come back and take the training more than once? When was the last time they took the training, etc. The learning management system is chock full of very interesting data points for you to leverage. And keep in mind, metrics are company and group specific. And there are certain regions of the world, they may have stricter privacy laws that don't allow you to report on certain things, so keep that in mind. You don't want to be violating any kind of regulations or laws. But these metrics are company specific and group specific. Very important message here, reinforce the value of the training program that you are rolling out. And you can do this a number of different ways. Smarttech offered a couple of very nice data points from some independent research done by the Ponemon Institute. I've referenced one here on the bottom right. This is the average cost of a data breach to an organization in the US. It's about $5 million, which is a lot. In fact, last year it was nearly $6 million. And making your company aware of this, making the staff aware of this, can actually make a difference, because we have found that most people take pride in the work that they do in the company they work for, and they don't want to see that company damaged. If you can help them understand how their actions can either prevent something bad from happening or improve the security or protect the brand of the company they work for, it will make a difference in the majority of cases. And even if it makes a difference in only 50% of the employees, that's much better off than where you would have been. All right, so some success factors. I mentioned a minute ago conducting a skills gap analysis to understand where you are before you start a training program. That, I can't stress how important that is. We've seen so many organizations acquire a training program from us and then roll it out only to realize that they needed something different, or they needed something that was tailored for Group A or Group B or Group C. So start with a skills analysis so you can make sure that you are either building or purchasing the right training program, and then customize it as best you can. Incorporating corporate culture is very important. I was surprised that at SAP they were able to be so creative in doing all the things that they did, because SAP is, even for a software company, they're a relatively conservative and old software company. And just the culture in Germany, and in that part of Germany in particular, is just a bit more stoic. So I was surprised that they were able to get so creative, but they were, and it was very, very effective. So rebranding, using company logos and taglines wherever possible, tying in your information security policies so your employees understand that you're not just asking them to do this because you're mean and you want to take them away from their job. Help them understand that you're asking them to do this because it is important to the company from either a compliance perspective or a brand protection perspective or a data breach perspective. And again, make it personal. Help them understand how losing company records is akin to losing your bank account information as an individual. And let's be honest, security is not the most interesting topic in the world. However, there are some very interesting types of security things that you can include to engage the staff and make it more interesting. For software developers, for example, they will often view security training or security activities as a tax, as a drain, because they are tasked with getting certain features developed by a certain day and time. And if you're asking them to go through security training, you're impacting that. Well, you know what? Hacking is a very cool thing right now. And developers are creative people in general, and they would love to understand how this software application that they're building, which of course they will think is the greatest thing, how it can be exploited, how it can be hacked. So include a hacking demo to get the interest level and engagement level of software development teams included. I mentioned making it personal for executives and drawing analogies between their personal banking or identity or health records and the company records. These are all very useful tactics that you can roll out. In this fourth bullet here, making it role-based, task-based, technology-specific, all very important. Obviously you're not going to give a secure coding training to Betty the cashier, so make sure Betty the cashier understands best practices of safe credit card handling. And you better make that training pretty short and pretty sweet, because you don't want to invest a tremendous amount in Betty the cashier, because Betty the cashier most likely in a year from now is going to be in some different job. So again, make it role-based, task-based, and technology specific. Finally, oops, sorry. I'm going to close by a couple of solutions that we offer specifically in the training area. All of these can be procured directly through your Smarttech folks. And also, as William mentioned earlier, Smarttech can assist you with phishing simulation service, full security operations center, and a whole bunch of other fantastic security solutions. So what is offered from a general staff security awareness training? We have an information security and privacy awareness training program. And again, this is a program. It's not just computer-based training. There's also all of those additional asynchronous assets available that you can also purchase and customize. And we also do have a PCI Essentials program, which was built in conjunction with the PCI Council itself. This is a security awareness training program specific to safe credit card handling. For software development teams, we have an extensive e-learning program that offers role-based, technology-based, and platform-based training for software architects, developers, and testers, whether they're writing mobile applications, web applications, embedded systems applications, it doesn't matter. And then, in the vein of making things fun and interesting, we also offer a command and control hackathon. What we've done here is we have built several web applications. We've built an online banking application. We've built an HR, human resources application, and we've also built an e-commerce application. So we've got e-commerce, banking, and HR. And we have built about 80 vulnerabilities into each one of these web applications. And after a development team has gone through training, we invite them to come and test these applications because they are in a safe sandbox to find the security vulnerabilities, to see if they can apply what they've just learned. And this is a very fun kind of capture the flag environment. For those of you that remember the 1980s movie War Games with Matthew Broderick, it's very similar here, where we've built the assets and we're asking the folks that we just trained to be the red team and attack these assets and try to capture the flag, so to speak. So all of these programs are available through Smarttech. And we have about 5 minutes left. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it back over to William and the Smarttech folks for closure.
Thanks very much, Ed. Firstly, I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to attend today. It's greatly appreciated, and we hope that you found it interesting. I would also like to thank our presenters, Will and Ed. Thanks for that, guys. It was very informative. So at this point, we'd like to open the floor to the audience and field some questions. So we have 1 for Will and 2 for Ed. Now, before I do this, we had a lot of queries about the slide decks and the material itself. So just to reiterate, everyone will receive a copy of the presentation sent to the email address that you provided on registration. You will also be provided with contact details for some of our presenters. So I'm going to start with the first question for you, Will. And basically, we've had this question come in. It says, what level of protection does an organization receive from standard antivirus products such as McAfee, Symantec, and Trend?
Okay, well, that's a very good question. Thanks for the question, audience. In our SOC, we run VirusTotal, which is an online service that analyzes suspicious files and URLs and facilitates the detection of various worms and Trojans and all kinds of malware, etc. So basically, when we detect that one of our clients potentially has a breach, we can immediately detect, analyze, and we can quarantine this attack using various softwares. However, in most cases, what we would do is we would put this strain of malware or virus into VirusTotal, which will tell us that some major antivirus vendors have not yet updated their signatures quick enough to eliminate the attack. So recently we ran a survey internally which revealed standard antivirus would give a company approximately 38% protection, which really shows that antivirus should not be used as a method of protection alone for an organization, and it's very important to have other specific perimeter defenses as well as obviously your cyber awareness training as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thanks, Will. I've one more question actually for Ed, and it's been posted. So basically we were asked, do you think that upcoming self-service portals pose a potential risk to organizations as well?
Very good question, and the short answer is yes. Self-service portals, whether they are internal-facing or web accessible, are, for all intents and purposes, just another web application. And they need to be built and protected with all the security that you would put into any application that is handling sensitive data. Now, if the portal is not handling or processing sensitive data, then you can take a much less stringent approach in terms of the security diligence that you're applying to it. And one method that we recommend is something all of us practice every single day, we just don't realize we practice it, is something called threat modeling. But when you apply threat modeling to a portal or to a web application product, it really allows you to understand and simulate, even just mentally or on a whiteboard, the types of threats or attacks that this application might face. And once you do that, the next step is to then postulate, well, how might I defend against these threats and attacks? What defenses do I have to put in place to make sure that those threats cannot be realized? And as I mentioned, we do this every single day. When I leave my house, do I lock my front door? Yes, I do. Do I have an alarm system on my house in case people break in? Yes, I do. Well, do I have the alarm system just on my first floor windows and doors, or do I also have it on my second floor? Well, I decided I only need it on my first floor because it's much more difficult to access the second floor and it costs twice as much. That's the kind of threat modeling we do in our personal lives every single day. Software development teams really need to do that more when they're considering building out something like a self-service portal. And again, it doesn't matter if it's internal or external. Internal might have different types of risks, but you still need to go through the same kind of exercise.
Okay, Ed, thanks very much. We've come to the end of the webinar. We've run out of time. Apologies to those we couldn't answer your questions. We will try afterwards to do that. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone for attending and our presenters, and I hope you found it informative. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.